This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society BC, brought to you by Sitka Game. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Ayotte. Thank you Sitka Gear and Ayotte for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a truly special edition of the Talk is Sheep podcast. We're joined by four conservation superheroes in our space. The Wild Sheep Society BC has been heavily engaged on the Fraser River. I think all of our listeners are familiar with the Fraser River Test and Remove project. It's been going now for 7 years, $1.5 to $2 million into the project. And we're at the coalface here with the four sort of key drivers behind this project. We've got Chris Procter from the ministry. We got Chris Barker from the Wild Sheep Society BC, Jeremy Ayotte from the Sheep Separation Program, Ben Berukoff from Canadian Wildlife Capture. So all four of these gentlemen, I think most of the wild sheep community is familiar with. Gentlemen, it's an honor to have you on today. It's a cast of thousands, so we'll be very direct in our questioning. A lot of stuff to talk about. Really excited to have you guys on. To kick things off, we're going to start with Chris Procter. Chris, if you could just give us an overview of your involvement in the project and just the 30,000-foot view of how you've been involved on it.
Yeah, you bet, Kyle. Thanks for having us on here today. I'm Chris Procter, senior wildlife biologist with the ministry based in Kamloops. Been working on Bighorn sheep management in that region since about 2008, and working on the Fraser River specifically since about the same time, but more recently on the test and remove stuff that we're talking about today since we started in 2018.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks so much, and thanks for being here. Next on my list, I've got Chris Barker.
Hey, Kyle. Good to see you guys again and the rest of the cast of thousands. As always, a pleasure, gents. Chris Barker, Wild Sheep Society BC, Vice President, Projects Chair. Kind of kick-started this project off around a few whiskeys and beers with Mr. Procter in Kamloops and said, what can we do to help this population? And the test and remove and everything we're doing on the Frasers evolved kind of out of that conversation. So, truly, stuff does happen in a bar.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Give us your timeline when you started getting involved in the conservation game and then when you got involved specifically on the Fraser stuff.
Holy smokes, buddy.
I know. This is important.
Been with the society for over 30 years. So anything to do with sheep conservation for that long. And, talking with Chris, actually, I think I met Chris. He was just started work, I think, with Doug Jury, and we were talking about Spence's Bridge at the time, what our Spence's Bridge sheep look like. So I don't know what year that was, Chris, but it's probably 10 years prior to the Fraser, I think. Oh,
yeah, for sure.
So we've been, with the Fraser since 2016. We kind of started fleshing some ideas and how we were going to fund this thing, but worked with Chris probably back, I think it was 2008 maybe we started Spence's Bridge, maybe earlier, I can't remember, but somewhere around there, Kyle.
Awesome. Jeremy Ayotte, if you could give us a rundown of your involvement in the broader conservation community and then the Fraser specifically, please.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Jeremy Ayotte, I'm a consulting wildlife biologist. Thanks for pulling this together. I think it's always just so important to get the word out and keep people up to date on all the good effort that's going on, especially in the Fraser. I think it was 2012. I started working actually for Dr. Helen Schwanche as the provincial coordinator for the BC Sheep Separation Program. Back then, that was a contract that Helen managed through funding from Habitat Conservation Trust Fund. And it was actually just soon after I started that we had the chasm die off. So that chasm herd that is affiliated with the Fraser River metapopulation of California bighorn sheep went through a pretty catastrophic die-off, 2012, 2013, from about 100, a little over 100 down to 20. So that was kind of I guess a trial by fire for me, and brought me into the world of pneumonia and disease transmission from domestic to wild sheep. And yeah, by 2018, I had worked with Chris on and off quite a bit, and so got involved early with him, Chris Procter and Chris Barker and Ben, as we started this Fraser River project. So I've been involved with it ever since. I guess the main capacity that I've been leading is, I guess you could call it logistics, a lot of funding proposals and progress reports, keeping track of budgets, working with Chris on writing things up, and trying to steer this mighty ship and recover these awesome bighorn sheep along the Fraser River.
Keeping the mighty ship going.
That's awesome, Jeremy. I really appreciate all you've done over the years on this critical project. And last but not least is the award winner, the legend himself, Ben Berukoff. Ben, welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for getting us all together and talking more about sheep in the Fraser River. Yeah, pretty excited to share what we're learning out there and the things that we're doing, and the exciting news that it's working. Yeah, we're making a difference here, guys.
Yeah, awesome, Ben. For our listeners, I know everyone knows who you are, but just touch a little bit on what you've been doing on the project, if you don't mind, for us, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben Berukoff. I'm the owner and one of the pilots for Canadian Wildlife Capture. I've been flying helicopters for the last 25 years. Started Canadian Wildlife Capture in 2012. Started working on the Fraser River right from its inception of the thoughts of test and remove, with initial MOBI testing, I think, in 2017. And then we've been catching somewhere between 50 and 120 sheep each year for the test and remove. And I've been just the helicopter pilot, helping out where I can.
Just the helicopter pilot. Interesting for our listeners. And Ben, we got to do one. We're going to do one separately because it's worthy. And honestly, we could do one separately with all you guys, and we probably will. But Ben was a recipient of the Wild Sheep Society BC Lex Ross Award this winter. And then JABC, he received the Fair Chase Award. And truly a legend, man. You've done so much for our community and got so much recognition. And it feels weird to be saying it in the company of the four of you here, because all you guys have done so much for conservation. But you got that recognition this year, Ben, and you deserve it. That Sitka film, what I'll do is I'll put a link to that Sitka film. I'm not sure if it's on Sitka's site, but we'll put it on. I think I have access to it. We'll put it on our YouTube channel. It just highlights the great work that this team's done. Chris and Jeremy and Ben, you guys are all in that film, and it's really a great testimony and really highlights the great work that you guys are all doing. So Barker got left out of the limelight on that one, but the one thing. So I took some notes here while you guys were talking, and between the four of you, and this doesn't include me, and I'm just a baby in this anyway. I just got started, but 73 years of experience working in conservation. That's staggering to me. Absolutely phenomenal. Okay, gentlemen, what I would like to do is I'd like to take it back to sort of the origin story of this. And I think most appropriate, Chris can talk on this. I don't know if Procter, you want to jump in, or Barker, you want to jump in, but let's talk about the origin story of the Fraser, maybe a little bit of the history. Barker, why don't you start with the history? Because I think the society itself, its origins are steeped in the Fraser. There were the die-off in the sort of late 80s, early 90s that sort of precipitated the work that we started to do there. And then I want Chris Procter to tell a story of the work that he did to start leading the work on the Fraser.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, so I think originally when we were first looking at the Fraser, there was still really good numbers of sheep there, but we were looking at habitat work. And this is probably prior to me meeting Chris. But we're looking at habitat work more so in Region 5, Churn Creek, up to Chilcotin, just to see if we could expand on some of that stuff, because the sheep were really concentrated. So, Churn Creek, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, but there used to be 600 sheep in Churn Creek that used to winter, and there was a migratory population that came in there. And I think that was early 80s. Those numbers were sheep there. So, back then there wasn't really an issue. It was more looking at habitat. And then we started to see some population declines, started around Big Bar. And then really didn't know what was going on. There was different stories out there that, it's this, it's that. And then we'd have crappy lamb recruitment at Big Bar. Then we'd have good lamb recruitment. And so it was really leading us down a path that we didn't understand. So it wasn't really until that stuff came out of Waddle and, the two guys that were leading the chair for the Rocky Crate chair from the foundation. And I forget the doctor's names.
Tom Besser.
It was Tom Besser, and then I'm trying to follow up the fellow before him. He had a really weird name, and I can't remember it now. But he kind of compounded on Tom's work, and that really led us into what the organism we were looking at and what MOVI was, or Mycoplasma pneumoniae. And we still didn't understand what was going on in Fraser at that point in time. We just started to see a lamb recruitment going down, populations declining, and just, what are we going to do here? And I think there was a study out of University of Saskatchewan that said, yeah, we've got some lamb sickness. It looks like pneumonia or something else. It wasn't 100%. And then, like I said, we were bullshitting at our convention in Kamloops with Chris, and I think Pat was there, Chris, there was myself. I don't know if Doug was there. And we just said, we need to do something for these sheep. And what does that look like? And that's when I think I'll flip it over to Chris, because he's the one that kind of made that strategic evolution of where we're at and what we needed to do, and find out the how much prevalence was on the Fraser for MOVI. So I'll flip it over to Chris.
Yeah, I think you got her mostly correct there, Chris. So pretty significant population declines in the 90s, by about 70% from mid-90s until we started the test and remove in 2018. The sheep declined pretty rapidly in those first couple of years. So by early 2000s, there was about a 50% decline. And then between then and when we started in 2018, it just slowly declined another 50% or so. So those numbers, as best as we can piece together, there were at least 27 or 2,800 sheep on the Fraser River north of Lillooet in the 90s. I kind of think there could have been more than that, but that's kind of what we've pieced together. By the time we started, there were about 800 sheep in that same area, so pretty significant declines. Definitely knew that it was a lamb survival problem, even going way back to the initial declines. Back then, we knew nothing about MOVI. Nobody really knew anything about MOVI at that time. And fast forwarding a bunch of years to, when we were doing the lamb studies with Wild Sheep Society in around 07, 08, 2010, when we had the University of Saskatchewan doing some work there. That's when we first detected MOVI on the Fraser River in 2010 in sick lambs at Big Bar and Pavilion. And I think if you look back, we've seen this complicated population dynamics across these groups of sheep on the Fraser River, where you go through stretches of time where some of those groups have really low lamb survival, other groups have better lamb survival. Then that group that was doing better, all of a sudden for a bunch of years, will have really low lamb survival. So we were just seeing this complicated pattern of lamb survival, but the overall effect was that the sheep were slowly declining. So we knew we had Movi 2010. We didn't really know what to do about it at that time. Around the time that Chris was referencing that we started talking about it. Yeah, I think it was like a perfect storm of things. We were seeing the results from the first test and removes in the US, in Idaho and elsewhere. And, those results were looking really encouraging. Wild Sheep Society had money to put up. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it started. All these things aligned at the same time, and we decided to go for it. So at the time, we didn't really know. I mean, we assumed that Movi was everywhere on the Fraser River, but we didn't know for sure. So to start, we went and just randomly tested sheep up and down the Fraser River, about 10% of any group of sheep we could find. And we pretty much found it everywhere. Found that sheep had been exposed to that bacteria in every group of sheep that we caught, I think. And for sure, we found about 10% of the sheep had Movi in their nose. So yeah, that's kind of how we got it off the ground.
Chris and Jeremy, if you want, you can jump in here too. I know Dr. Helen Swanson was involved in the early days. I know Helen's still involved, but she certainly was involved in it. But how does it go from a concept to execution? Because there's a big leap between and I know you knew the society had some money. But how does it go from, okay, there's this idea and people are doing this down south and it's working, but how does that come to fruition? Is that you got to get a manager on board? How does that come to fruition in terms of the government? Or is that a workflow within your workflow, Chris? And you're like, okay, this is a priority for me in my region, and we're going to work on this, and then you just get after it and make it happen.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, the Fraser River Bighorn sheep has always been an important herd in the province, for sure, in Region 3 and 5. I mean, it still is the largest California Bighorn sheep herd in Canada. Well, I mean, they're only in BC, but so it's always been a priority. There's been in the past, there was a lot of management planning invested on the Fraser River. We just didn't know back in those days what the disease was, right? So we weren't that successful with that management planning process and anything that happened after. But once we became aware of what the issue was and we knew that there was a way we could address it, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's always been a priority on my work plan here. So it was just more, I mean, a bigger project than we'd ever done on the Fraser River, but yeah, it just kind of slid right into our list of priorities. And I think, when we started, I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. We had no idea. Test and remove was a brand new concept to us. So we reached out to Francis and others, Perry Wolf, Nevada, the people that actually had experience doing it at the time. And there were a lot of discussions with those folks about, when we were setting up how we were going to accomplish this on the Fraser River. And Jeremy was there in all those discussions too. So yeah, I mean, once we had a plan and we had the money, it was just a matter of making it happen.
So the thing that blows me away, I think at the start of this, you were talking $1.5 million, 10 years, which is a pretty darn big project from for us, that's a huge project. I don't know, maybe from a government perspective, it's not quite as daunting. And I think we're like 1.6, 1.7 into it with increasing costs and obviously, and then, the comprehensive work that's being done. So we're looking at 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 million over 10 years. So it's a huge undertaking. Jeremy, can you touch a little bit about this on all these moving pieces? So bringing everyone together. So obviously the society's been involved, government's involved, but then there's been, you've got grant and aid from the Wild Sheep Foundation and HCTF. There's a lot of lot of people got their hands in this. There's a lot of heavy work being done by a lot of different entities all across North America, really.
Yeah, I think Kyle, your line of questioning is so good because I think it really speaks to the community of wild sheep conservationists, and Chris mentioned it as well. I think there was three key components there. One is that we had good science. We had the work of Tom Besser and others um, in the States at universities, pushing the understanding of this disease and how it works and what the causal agent is. We had the first couple test and remove projects that had encouraging results. So we started off from a place of good science, and I think that was really critical when we went asking for some pretty large dollars to start this project. And then we also had that community, that international community of wild sheep advocates, scientists, conservationists, and like Chris mentioned, we work closely with them. It's an amazing group of people, really. Chris Barker's was instrumental in all of this kind of behind the scenes and just making sure that that our requests for funding came with the backing of our local Wild Sheep Society. Yeah, I think it was just kind of a coming together of a bunch of key things, and just you can't emphasize enough how important it is to have the right people involved. But yeah, we had several different large funding organizations coming forward to support this over the years, and there's very few projects like this, I think, for a wildlife biologist to be involved in, and yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
Awesome, Jeremy. On the funding side, how challenging is it? So obviously there's all these moving entities, moving parts, and then even budgets are changing sort of yearly, and you plan 1 year for pavilion, which is a drop net capture, and obviously the budget's a little bit lower, and then you go from that this year to going out and capturing 120 sheep in a helicopter. That's a huge swing, and that's a lot to manage when you figure that you've got 5 or 6 funding partners that need to make this happen too, right?
Yeah, and I think I'd give kudos to Chris Procter here because we were fortunate in a way that this hadn't been done before in Canada, so we weren't following any other template or protocol. We were really making it up as we went along. So we did have that freedom, and you combine that freedom with people like Chris who just understand this landscape, and Ben as well. These guys just understand the landscape, the complexities, the challenges of capturing sheep in these places. I think we came up with an approach it's a novel approach compared to other test and remove projects. In the States, our methods were slightly different, and I think they've proven out to be arguably more economical with less impact, less stress on sheep. And I think we've caught a lot of people's attention for that. And I think that overall has helped our requests for budgets as we go through this. And yeah, they are, they're ever expanding as each year that goes by that we are treating new units of sheep. So those are basically cohesive bands of sheep that we're going out and doing the test and remove on. We are also increasing the amount of effectiveness monitoring we're doing. So, and that's really comes down to fall lamb surveys. So we're basically at this point now in the project, we're flying just about the entire Fraser River study area, following up on how effective the test and remove treatment has been. So there's huge costs associated with that, and they just increase every year. So yeah, it's been daunting for sure when you look at the numbers, but I think what we've got going for us are the testimonial results. We can show this insane increase in and lamb numbers year after year and consistently across treated bands of sheep. So that's really what's helping keep this going for sure.
Okay, awesome.
I just throw in there that it's super helpful to have funding partners that are flexible a little bit, right? Because I mean, you just never know how it's going to go, right? We may try to catch sheep in a certain way. It doesn't work out. You got to fall to plan B, which is more costly, but having funding partners that have been flexible has been super helpful.
Awesome. Ben, can you touch a little bit for us on the operational aspect of it? So, I've never been in the field to watch any of your work, but I look at some of the crap that you're doing out there on a daily basis, and it looks like it's a little bit more daunting than maybe just out on the Bald-ass Prairie chasing down a mule deer and trying to net it. And maybe that's a bit simplistic in my mind, but there has to be some real serious operational challenges out there on the landscape when you're doing this capture work.
Sure. Some of the unique challenges on the Fraser River is that we're catching every single ewe out there, plus a few rams, and then we're also catching some lambs as well. But we have to catch every single adult ewe that's out there. So a big part of the job is to make sure we know how many are out there in the subpopulation that we're going to catch and treat each year. So say if there's 100 ewes, we know by the end of the end of this year that we got to catch 100 ewes out there. So to catch, say, 10% of a population is relatively easy. Sheep do live in fairly open terrain, which aids itself to easy captures. But what happens on this project on the Fraser River is we catch half or 60-70% of the sheep in the subpopulation that we're treating that year, and then the remaining 30% is where it becomes really challenging. So when we find an uncollared, untested ewe that we need to catch, we go outside of normal capture operations and we have to catch that animal. And so if it's in the timber, we have to haze it out of the timber. Sometimes they don't want to come out of there. So Chris Procter is shooting bangers, which is kind of like a bear banger, but it's like a bear bird scare bangers at him to chase him out. Sometimes we drop off our mugger, which is the person that's sitting in the front seat there, to chase the sheep out of the timber so that we can get a net on them. Sometimes we're darting sheep if they're in areas that don't lend themselves too well to safe net gun captures. But essentially we have to catch each adult ewe. And so that means going back to the same groups time and time again to make sure we get every single last one. We use the collars that are already deployed to find each group of sheep. So we'll beep in with the VHF telemetry to find that group. That can be challenging and time consuming in itself because the topography is very steep and rugged, and sheep, when they hear the helicopter, after they get used to hearing the helicopter, they run under trees to hide, and sometimes they don't run around. So even though you're hovering there looking for the sheep, you can hear the beeps on the telemetry equipment. A lot of times it just takes a long time to get eyes on the sheep. And then sometimes even after that, it'll be just one single sheep standing there and it's already got a collar on it. It's already been tested. Let's move on. So we've come up with a pretty good system. Over the last 7 years of doing this, we started off doing a process that was common in the States where we catch a sheep, put it into a transport bag, sling it into a processing station where a ground crew will test and process each animal and then release them from there. But we've been doing it where we're testing, so we're swabbing right on the site. So we can speed up the process just by having less crew out in the field. So we're out there first light every day, just catching as many sheep as quickly as possible. And so with a 3-person crew in the helicopter, we'll try and catch 3 sheep on every capture. So if there's a group of 8 sheep, we'll try and catch 3 of them, and then we'll try and catch 3 more, and then the last 2, and then we're done. We can move on to the next group of sheep. So we've come up with a procedure that is pretty darn efficient in my mind to be able to catch every single last ewe in those subpopulations. Yeah.
So you mentioned you need to catch every ewe. Tell our listeners why that's important, why it's so critically important that you get every single animal.
Right. So if we leave one actively shedding ewe out there, it could compromise the whole project. And we're sort of, it seems to average out about 10% of the adult ewes are actively shedding moving. That's sort of over the years, that's roughly, I mean, there's some higher groups that have higher percentage of actively shedding ewes, but it sort of seems to average out about 10%. So there's a 1 in 10 chance that if we left one behind, that it could be an actively shedding ewe, and then the whole process. We're going to see good lamb recruitment for maybe a year after that, even if you left one shedder, but then it's just going to come back. It's going to persist on the landscape. So yeah, pretty critical that we get every last one, which is a huge task. And there's I don't know, I think the whole crew feels a pretty big weight to make sure that we get everyone. Yeah.
So on that note, how do you guys know how that you've got them all? Will you fly the area ahead of time and say, you know what, like you can do a really, really solid count? You're like, we really feel like there's 80 critters here that we need to capture. Or is it just like, you find the groups, you go out and you're like, no, we've caught all 8 of those. We're good there. And then you move on. So do you guys have a pretty good idea of the numbers you need to do? Or is it just sort of, you just play it by ear as you go?
We have a pretty good idea when we first go out there, because Chris Procter has usually done 1 or 2 surveys just to count ewes, and won't just fly over and just count them. They'll take high quality, high resolution photos so that you can dissect those groups of sheep back at the office, see like, there's 1 young ram, 2 older rams, 3 adult ewes, and 1 lamb or something like that along those lines. And then prior to any captures that we do for the test and remove, we'll go and just fly the entire area first and just like triple check, like how many sheep do we got to catch? Because before you start, like on that initial flyover, the sheep are fairly naive. Like they're just out doing sheep stuff out where they like to be, out in the open where they can see predators and danger. And they're fairly easy to count on that initial flyover. But once you start catching them, once you start mixing it all up, man, there's sheep just going everywhere. And then that's when they're hiding. That's when they're hiding in the little gullies and under the trees, under the juniper bushes, in the cliffs down by the rivers. And that's when they're not running from the helicopter anymore either, too. They'll just go hide underneath the tree. So that's where they're hard to find. But we have been doing a 2-pass test and remove. So we'll go and catch the majority of the sheep on the first pass. We'll spend probably like 3 or 4 days, catch the majority of the sheep, and then just leave, because it would take us like quite a few days of harassing those sheep and flying around to find every last one on that first pass. So we sort of do the majority of them, let it be for 2 weeks, come back. And then usually the sheep are back to doing sheep stuff out in the open. They're all kind of grouped up in small groups, but they're grouped up when we can easily pick out the ones that we haven't tested yet.
Awesome. Jeremy or Chris, can you guys just talk a little bit about what test and remove is? I know probably 90% of the people out there know what it is, but there's some people that are wondering what the hell that means. So just touch a little bit on the disease. Maybe don't go down the rabbit hole on Movi, because I think most people know what that is. But let's talk a little bit about the process of test and remove, what we're doing on the landscape.
Sure. Yeah. So a test and remove, like Ben was just alluding to, seeks to test every female sheep in a band of sheep that we are doing a test and remove on, in an effort to identify those female sheep that have the bacteria in their nose And if a sheep has the bacteria in its nose, it is a sheep that can transmit that bacteria to another sheep. And what we're ultimately trying to do with the test and remove program is to break that chain of transmission from an adult ewe to their newborn lambs, which is one of the ways that this disease persists over the decades. In some cases, like we're seeing here on the Fraser River, as long as you have that proportion of females that have that bacteria in their nose and can give it to their newborn lambs, they do give it to their newborn lambs every year, and then the lambs give it to each other, and often most of them end up dead by the fall or end of summer. So we are trying to identify those females, and then we are euthanizing them so they are no longer there to transmit that bacteria to their lambs. That's the
awesome
part of test and remove.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you guys go out, you capture, you test, you color, you do all the tests, obviously, right? What kind of things are you checking for when you capture a sheep, as a general rule? Not just Movi, probably, right? It's other stuff too.
Yeah, no, we're taking a bunch of samples from the sheep. So we're taking the nasal swabs to look for Movi in their nose. We take blood for a bunch of different reasons. Several different health tests, one of which, though, is looking for exposure to Movi. So we're looking for antibodies in the blood, which means that we know that sheep had been exposed to Movi in the past. We take hair samples. We take fecal samples. We age the sheep. We do a body condition score on the sheep, just as a general measure to their general health. And we put a radio collar on the sheep, a ear tag on the sheep. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Am I forgetting something, Ben?
Yeah, fecal and ear biopsy.
Yes, we take an ear biopsy too for genetic analysis.
Okay, and the collar, is that exclusively to go and capture them after, if they are MOV positive, or are you using that for range usage and a whole bunch of other stuff as well?
Well, we got a couple different collars that we use. So a lot of the sheep, are about 30 of them anyways now, have GPS collars. They're scattered around the Fraser River. Those are the ones that are collecting data over multiple years, like 5 to 7 years. But when it comes time for test and remove, we put a cheap, small VHF only collar on every sheep that we catch, just so that we can both determine easily from the air which sheep have been captured already, and also so we can go back and find the sick ones once the tests are done.
Okay, awesome. So then, obviously, just touch a little bit about. So I think we covered that, but you're only basically catching the ewes because they're the ones that are transmitting to the lambs, and obviously there could be an event where a ram passes it along as well. But I guess them being adults, there's a lot less risk of them dying and then also passing it on to a lamb as well. Is that the logic? Am I correct there?
Yeah, it's a good question, Kyle. Yeah, I mean, so we based what we're doing here on the work that was done previously in the US. We're targeting that specific chain of transmission from a female to its lamb. There are rams that can carry Movi, and we have caught rams that have Movi in their nose. They are not there to give it to the young lambs, so they're not part of that specific chain of transmission that we're trying to address. And we think that they are not, as far as we know, they are not all that important in how this disease is transmitted within the herd from year to year. But it can happen. It could happen. Right. So when the other thing that we were trying to balance when we started, already on the Fraser River, we estimated we had to capture 550 female sheep. If you add the rams, we're at about 750 or maybe even a bit more than that. they are often in more difficult places. They're often like, up in the trees and the rugged cliff timbered stuff. So much more challenging to capture. So yeah, we based it on the science that existed and on that specific link between females and their lambs. And then, I mean, the idea in our minds when we started was, well, let's evaluate how this is working, recognizing that, there are things that can go wrong here. Like maybe you don't catch every female sheep. Maybe you do catch a female sheep that has movie in its nose, but you don't pick it up on the swab, and or the PCR test misses it. And then another reservoir obviously is the rams. So there are things that can, hamper our success here, but, we chose to focus on the science and monitor our treatment effectiveness, which Jeremy touched on a little bit. So doing the lamb counts, we also go in and capture about 25% of the surviving lambs after we do a test and remove in the next year. And we're looking for their level of exposure to MOVI to let us know whether, there's a female that still sheds the bacteria there. And then, it's been working out. So not to say that someday down the road, a ram may not undermine what we're doing here, but, so far so good. I think one of the things that in the States anyways, that they attribute the lack of importance of rams to is that they don't survive as well as females. So even if you do have rams that are carrying it, they don't live as long as a female does. So more likely to naturally clear it themselves.
Awesome. Jeremy?
Yeah, I just add to what Chris was saying there. I mean, this is research, and there's uncertainty, and I think exactly what Chris was explaining there, that the goal is to try to capture and understand that uncertainty in the study design. So that's why we do all this follow-up work and monitor treatment effectiveness. And and it's just pinned to the ultimate goal to recover these sheep. So that's why the focus on ewes, and that's why the focus on turning that lamb survival around.
So on that note, the project is 7 years old. Test and remove is relatively new. It's research. You use that word, Chris. What evolution, or have you seen much of an evolution since we began the project to where we are today? Obviously it's working. It's great, but are you seeing changes? I know that the Wild Sheep Foundation has had 2 or 3 workshops on it, the test and remove 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Lots of dialogue. Idaho's been a pioneer in this. I think BC's considered a pioneer in it. Has there been an evolution in the process has there been lessons learned and changes made, or do we get it right the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've all learned a ton over the last 7 years. For sure, when we started, just the idea of catching every female sheep was like, holy man, are we going to be able to do this? So we learned a lot about how to do that. Learned a lot about the places sheep like to hide. And, it's kind of a crazy idea. I mean, you're looking for a bacteria that can't be seen, in sheep that live in rugged environments out in the wild, over a pretty vast landscape. So, yeah, I think, we've learned a bit about the testing. We've been doing multiple different tests on these sheep, each one that we catch. And, one of the things that we used like right off the bat, which hadn't been used anywhere previously, is a portable PCR unit where you can actually you don't need a lab to do the PCR test. You can do it the same day, back wherever you're staying in your camp or whatever. So we had a lot of learnings about interpreting those results and trying to figure out which sheep actually have movie in their nose and that kind of stuff. And those are the big ones, I think.
I think biggest one, Chris, was you guys did the first year where you captured the sheep and you brought them back to like a base camp. And you guys had that real vision to switch to provide less stress to the sheep and less flying around when you guys switched from bringing the sheep back to a field base, whatever you want to call it, to doing the process you're doing now. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Chris. We did learn a bit about that. And Ben talked about this too. So when we started, the first test and remove that we did, we were just catching those sheep and putting them in a sling bag and slinging them to like a processing site where we had a crew of people on the ground to do the sampling and testing and stuff. Some of those sheep were down for, it takes 1 hour to do the biomeme PCR test. So by the time you get a sheep to the site, you get the nasal swab, you get it prepped into the biomeme, those sheep were down for at least an hour and a half. In some cases, probably longer than that. It's a little more expensive too, flying sheep back and forth a couple at a time or whatever. So yeah, we, after that first year, we transitioned to just small crew, catch a sheep, take the samples, put a radio collar on it, let it go, and then do the test later. And that means you have to go back and find the ones that are sick later. But certainly a lot cheaper, more cost effective, and I think a lot easier on the sheep. The one drawback of not doing it that way, though, is, I think that first year was a really good opportunity to get people engaged on the ground. We had, a bunch of our First Nation partners there. We had wild sheep members there. We had all kinds of people there. So those are always good events to get people engaged with what we're doing and what's happening.
Yeah, the one thing Go ahead, Jeremy. It's good.
Yeah, no, it just reminded me of somebody else, a few people who've been just so key in this project, and that's Sherry Wilmot and the staff at the Wildlife Health Branch. We're making huge decisions on the results of these tests, right? It's live or die for these sheep based on those results. I'd say we've learned a lot. In this detailed kind of genetics world of trying to identify MOV from a snot sample. We've learned about, we collect multiple swabs now. We've learned about how some swabs are dirtier than others because these sheep do a pretty good nosedive when they get caught in that net. And Sherry's kind of commitment, dedication to just doing things well. Like I think everybody in this project has that commitment. That's been really important as well.
Well, and it's interesting too, that BC has a bit of a different test and remove approach than Idaho. And I know you touched on it a little bit there earlier, Chris, but Idaho's two swings and you're out. Whereas BC, if you got a very strong positive, it's not good. And, so it's a little bit of a different approach than we're seeing down south. And you guys have been saying, our science speaks for itself. You've got a pretty good track record. We've done well with that process. So, anything to uncover there at all? I guess it is what it is, but just different jurisdictions with different approaches to it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, relative to the one or two test approach. So, the disease is pretty complex. These sheep, you can have female sheep that chronically shed that bacteria. Like every time you catch and test it, it'll have back the movie in its nose. There are intermittent carriers too, which are sheep that have a reservoir for this bacteria, but it's not necessarily in their nose all the time. So, The approaches in the US are generally geared towards identifying those chronic carriers, whereas our one strike, one test approach, if you are a female sheep intermittently shedding this disease, but you are shedding it on the day we catch you, then yeah, you're out. We probably remove a few more sheep than our counterparts do, but in my view, if you're trying to do what you're trying to do here, any sheep that has Movi in its nose, I'm not sure why we would leave it there.
Yeah, fair. Okay, so let's talk about results. We've done all this work. We've spent all this money. Is it a good investment? Are we doing the right thing? And do you have some results for us, either Jeremy or Chris? I think you guys have some pretty solid stats. I know we're pretty excited to see those numbers every year, so I'd love to hear where we're at.
Yeah, I got those numbers at the top of my head, Jeremy, unless you want to go.
No, you go ahead, Chris. Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Pretty successful. So I got some survey results to share here too that we just wrapped up here not too long ago. So on average, we've seen improvements in summer lamb survival up to 600% in some of these bands of sheep. So that's going from super low lamb ratios like 0 or 1 or 2 to 60. So that's pretty impressive. We've been doing it for about 6 years, I think, test and remove. And we've treated 12 bands of sheep. We're doing those lamb surveys every fall on 12 bands of sheep over a whole bunch of years now. So a whole bunch of different surveys looking at lamb recruitment rates in the fall. And on average, they are about 48 lambs per 100 ewes in treated areas versus 13 lambs per 100 ewes in an untreated area. So on average, that's whatever that works out to. That's about a 300% increase in lamb survival through the summer. And that's been pretty consistent and pretty durable in places where we started. So like the Ward Creek band of sheep, which is where we started in 2020. We have those results for 5 years now. The lamb survival in that band of sheep was 0 for the previous 2 or 3 years before starting. And it's been, the lamb ratios have been 45 to 60 ever since. So, and that's the same for every other band of sheep. We've seen a little bit of variation in those lamb ratios, but in all cases, they are better than they were previously. And in cases where we have control lamb counts to compare to, the ones in the treated areas are better than the control areas too. In terms of numbers of sheep, it's getting pretty challenging, unfortunately, to survey these sheep given what we're doing. But we just did a survey, and I know that we missed some pretty significant groups of sheep. But even despite that, we saw an increase in numbers from 2022 to 2025 of about 15%. So that's pretty good news. And like I said, I think if we had a better count, that would have been even higher. So looking really good. And that's basically now just that increase is entirely on the west side of the Fraser River. I mean, we just started doing these treatments on the east side of the Fraser River. So really too new to see a big change there yet.
Do you happen to have how many sheep you've caught in that time frame, roughly?
I know roughly. So we've as part of the test and remove, we've tested 420 sheep. We've euthanized 54. But overall, I think it's closer to about 600 sheep when you add in the lambs that we've tested, the random surveillance testing that we did. We're often, just putting collars, redeploying our old collars on future test and remove areas. So we do a bunch of that every year too. It's closer to 600 in total.
Awesome. Okay, I guess this is a shout out to our members for how important the work that they do. I guess the lamb recruitment stuff. So you talked about lamb recruitment, so pre versus post. And so we try and do these lamb counts every year on the Fraser. We're going to try and do 3 this year. And that's important data because if you see low numbers in a treated herd, that's a red flag, right? That maybe there's a reoccurrence of MOV. So this isn't just some bullshit survey we're out there doing. It actually is really important for you guys to get a really good idea of what's going on in the landscape. That data is really helpful, is it not?
Yeah, you betcha. We are doing the official lamb counts in November, just prior to winter, and making sure we're well past that lamb mortality period too, as the main measure of treatment effectiveness here. But when lambs die during the summer, it also tells you a lot about what might be happening there, right? Like if you start seeing losing your lambs in July and August, that's right when we would expect that lambs will die from MOVI. So yeah, I think that's good data to have if we can get it. Super challenging to do that in the summertime, but we're getting it here and there. And yeah, definitely worthwhile exercise to monitor what's happening with lambs through the summertime in these treated areas.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks for all your input and all the listeners. It's a big job.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jen, what are we missing? What else do we need to talk about on this project? What important stuff do we want to share with our listeners?
I think Chris had a really good figure he shared with us earlier this year and what it actually costs per sheep when we're flying. Do you remember that figure, Chris? I can't remember what it was off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's about $2,400 right now, and that includes like capturing the sheep, the collar, the ear tags, that kind of stuff, doing all the health tests. It's about $2,400 per sheep.
Yeah, not for the faint of heart, eh? What does it look like, Chris? Can you talk about reinfection? Have you seen? So you're treating all these herds, and I've heard people ask about this. So, it's interesting. There's it's the Fraser, so there's the east side of the Fraser and the west side. So there's a natural barrier there, but we do know sheep swim the river. You've talked about that before. But there's these subsequent herds where you'll treat a herd, and then you'll go up to Fraser and treat the next herd. Are we seeing much reinfection? Is that a concern at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Kyle. So when we started, when we did the first surveillance sampling, we collared about 60 sheep between region 3 and 5. By the time we did our first test and remove, we had about a year of data from those collared sheep, and we used that data to identify sections of the Fraser River or bands of sheep that don't intermingle much. Some of those groups were too big for us to be able to actually capture and treat in one year. So we had to draw some boundaries, across connected groups of sheep in a couple places. But for the most part, we tried to minimize, where sheep might intermingle between different bands, which I think helped us with that aspect of it, because we knew that this was going to take us like 8 years or more to do. So yeah, I don't think we've seen that. We have seen a couple cases where we weren't initially successful for sure in removing MOVI from some of these bands, but it's hard to know what's going on there. Like, in one example, we had conflicting results on different PCRs, so we didn't remove the sheep. Saw that we still had lambs getting infected by MOVI, went back, looked at that sheep, saw that she was super sick, and then removed her at that time. So we've had a couple cases like that. And even a case where we're not sure how the sheep got reinfected. So, yeah, a bit challenging. It could have been one of those cases where, an untreated sheep came into contact with treated sheep. They're probably more connected than we think, but yeah, doing the best we can with the information we had. I mean, it's, a super challenge over, 200 kilometers of river and 17 different bands of sheep to do it as quick as we can without, with trying to minimize that anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's left? So we've had 7 years. We've done all these treatments. I think he said 13 bands done so far. What do we have? 12 bands. Sorry. What do we have left now on the Fraser? Are we going to wrap it up in the next couple of years, or is it what's involved?
Yeah, well, the end is getting to be in sight for sure now. So we got 5 bands left. We got Pavilion, which we've been trying to treat here the last couple of years on the south end on the east side. Everything beyond Pavilion is north of the Chilcotin River, west of the Fraser River. So Junction, Deer Park, and then a couple different groups of sheep up the Chilcotin River. So yeah, I think, Pavilion's a big one. It's going to take us probably a year on its own. Yeah, I would say 3 years at the most, to do this. And we may try and tackle everything north of the Chilcotin in 1 year too. We'll have a look at that. So 2 to 3 years, I'd say, to finish the treatments. I mean, after that, I think we should think about spending a bit of time, just probably randomly capturing lambs, in all places, just as a final check on their level of exposure to movie. But we haven't got to talking about that yet. That's just something in the back of my mind.
Awesome. All right. What else? Anything else, Ben?
Just like carrying on from what Chris Procter was talking about with the Pavilion there and some of the challenges that are presenting themselves around the Pavilion herd is doesn't lend itself to catching sheep from a helicopter very well there. There's a couple of big power lines. There's the highway that runs right through where the sheep like to hang out. And there's also some community houses there as well. So a big hazard, of course, we don't want to be chasing sheep around and they end up on the highway. And of course, blocking the road or closing the highway for extended period of time while we catch all the sheep is not a possibility. So what the team has been doing is attempting to do a drop net to catch a bunch of sheep, like hopefully up to 50 all at once. But it just hasn't, the sheep haven't cooperated and they haven't come into the bait site and haven't been able to get a giant drop net over top of them. But that one, I think, is going to continue to give us challenges to be able to treat that one. But that's where we're hoping to lean on some of the members of the Wild Sheep Society to help out with that.
Yeah, I think guys and gals are pretty excited if they're given that opportunity to go handle some sheep for sure. So,
Well, it's one of those rare opportunities on the Fraser River where you have, good access to it to get people engaged. So we're really hoping we can make something work there. But, man, the winters have just been so mild, and that's what I'm blaming it on anyway. See what happens if, I think we need a new plan. So we'll be talking about that going forward here, about how we might do this coming winter.
Drive net. Do a drive
net. It's possibly that's something like that is what we might have to do.
Very cool. Yeah, very exciting. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you guys enough. I know we only scratched the surface on this. There's so much other things that we could talk about, and probably have to have you guys on individually just to sort of go down some rabbit holes on your individual expertise. But Chris, your leadership on this, Chris Procter, your leadership on this file from the government has been phenomenal. And we know we couldn't do it without you, man. And you have so much respect. I was just down in Idaho I met with Frances Kassir from Idaho Fish and Game, and she just was speaking so highly of you and the work you've done. And I know Ben and Chris and everyone else who talked to feels the same way. So thank you for your leadership. And then Jeremy's had to drop off. Jeremy's just phenomenal on everything that he's done, the support he's given our community and on this project specifically. And Ben, what do we say? You know, all these awards, and they're just well-deserved, man. And on that note, I just want to touch a little bit on the people that have supported this. We've got so much support across. So obviously the government leading this and the work that Chris has done, and there's been Together for Wildlife money that's been involved with this, and government money been involved. The Wild Sheep Society BC and our membership, just phenomenal to everyone that's been involved with this project, the vision that they've seen and they've supported. Our biggest funding partner by far on this project has been the Wild Sheep Foundation, just incredible leadership through their grant aid. They've been phenomenal, as they always are, when it comes to wild sheep and supporting all jurisdictions across North America, but certain British Columbia. And then there's a number of chapters that stand out. Midwest Chapter, Wild Sheep Foundation, they've been a supporter for 5 or 6 years now. They continue to contribute. The Eastern Chapter, the Wild Sheep Foundation. Abbotsford Fish and Game, Ian Baird and everyone's come on as early adopter. They believed in the project and they've supported year after year after year. So a shout out to Abbotsford Fish and Game for their support. And then we've got Cabela's Outdoor Fund. They were in the first year. They supported us on this as well. So, and tons of individuals that have stepped up and supported. Chris, am I missing anyone? I know there's probably others, but Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation has been phenomenal as well. Just a huge supporter as well. I'm one of the bigger proponents of making this project possible as well. So tons of support. The First Nations involvement, Chris, you know, obviously there's a Fraser River Working Group and the different nations that have stepped up. And we all know that it all has to happen through co-management in British Columbia, and they've done their part. So this is one of those projects where everyone's carrying the load. There's very few exceptions where somebody's not doing their part.
Oh yeah, no, that's for sure. Yeah, there's so many people that have supported us. I mean, even right down to like all the landowners on the Fraser River, all our First Nation partners up and down the river. You know, there's 14 or 15 different communities along in our study area there. And all the funding support from all the groups that you mentioned, for sure, Kyle. And then there's the big team that actually makes this happen on the ground. It's not just Ben and I and Jeremy and Chris, right? Like there's a whole bunch of other people supporting there too.
Yeah, well said. And I think it shouldn't go without recognition either. We've said it before. We'll say it again, that Ben and his company, Canadian Wildlife Capture, we get the invoice every year, and it's a big invoice. There's a ton of work being done, and there's a 10% that comes off that every single time. And if you actually added that number up, Ben would be in the top 3 or 4 in contributors to this project as well. And that's money that's coming straight out of Canadian Wildlife Capture's genes. So 2% certified company, Ben, just amazing leadership, and we can't thank you enough for all you do. So phenomenal. Mr. Barker?
Yeah, just one thing, Kyle, I think, and I don't know whether you mentioned it, but I think it'd be a little bit remiss if you didn't mention Jurassic Classic. I know it's a funding arm of the society in GOABC, but Jurassic Classic's been in from day one. And just the way you guys market this to the people that attend, 52 people that attend that sturgeon on the Fraser, which ties right back into what we were doing higher up the river. So I just want to make sure you mentioned Jurassic Classic and all those supporters for, 10 years now, 12 years that's been going on, and every year they contribute to the Fraser. So,
yeah, well said. Yeah, absolutely. No, awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you guys so much. Just phenomenal work and really exciting. Every time I talk to Procter, I'm like, give me a number. How many sheep are on the Fraser? We know we started with 800, and that's the one thing Procter will not do. So I'm not even going to put him on the spot right now. But we know there's more sheep on there. But just like
anything, no, I just gave you a number, Kyle.
You gave me 15%. I want the number, buddy.
Oh, I can give you the number.
But phenomenal, and we know that test and remove is working. We're seeing increased numbers. But obviously it's a complicated, there's a whole bunch of other things, predation and a million other things going on the Fraser there too. So it's not in isolation as it never is with wildlife, but it's a really, really feel good story. And I'll tell you, when I talk to our funding partners on this and tell them like our lamb recruitment numbers, you know, we in the wild sheep world, we get a little bit of bad flack. You're like, well, you know, sheep numbers aren't really, you know, they're not, they haven't doubled like whitetail or turkey or whatever. And it's like, well, it's a little bit more complicated. But the Fraser River, we sell that one pretty darn easy. We're like, yeah, look at the lamb recruitment, man. We're what, 41 versus 13. That's a pretty good number. So I'll take that any day. So, awesome, gentlemen. Thank you. And Barker, all the hard work you do on behalf of the society, man, we're just super grateful. And again, to everyone that supports this project, phenomenal job. Just absolutely inspiring. I can't wait to have a whiskey at the end of it and celebrate being done. And hopefully we can enjoy some just huge amount of sheep populations and celebrate the successes.
Yeah, that's the hope. Getting back to what we used to see there, man, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Just a side note, I was down in Idaho, as I mentioned last week, and talking to Francis, and I was down there with Glenn Landris, chair of the Wild Sheep Foundation Board of Directors, and he was pointing out the two areas where those Spence's Bridge sheep were going to, and pretty cool to see that legacy there and those massive rams that are on there, and then you know they're having some disease issues too, but they're doing some great work on the test and remove side of things as well. So yeah, pretty cool success story, and we just need to get those numbers back up on the Fraser. So gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Appreciate all you do.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Kyle.
Hey, Kyle, yeah, and just, you know, we want to call things sometimes, you know, with a name or whatever, but this is a true legacy project for the province of BC, and just, you know, everybody involved is contributing to this legacy, because long after we're gone, I'm hoping this is still it's continuing in perpetuity. So it really is a legacy project for BC. So hats off, you guys. Thank you so much.